And welcome everybody to another wonderful week right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Very excited to have you all with us. Big show, big plan for you today. Of course, Beshear sounding off about pre-K for all, saying, "Oh, the mean old Republicans. They're what's stopping me from moving forward." Also, we have our tax dollars being used to bring in companies like, of course, data centers that individuals don't want. That leads to an overall thing about tax giveaways, a few other economic development money being spent to attract in something that, generally speaking, most people definitely could go without. I'm not saying everybody's necessarily against data centers. There's a select few, mainly those who work in government, that really, really want them. And then there's a fair amount of people that don't work in government, that I believe probably fall in the vast majority, that definitely don't want them. And then there's some people that are kind of in between, agnostic. But the fact that we're spending money to attract them in and trying to bring in something that at best your average citizen doesn't care about, doesn't want to go out and sort, well, that's worth a greater discussion. So we'll talk about that. Also, we have Adkins declares he's running for governor, setting up what might be the last great Democrat primary in general for some time, because they don't have much of a bench. In fact, the two that are currently declared, Jacqueline Coleman and, of course, Rocky Adkins, are the last two they have on their bench really that have any kind of statewide name ID, and even that's limited. Will they be able to pull off a win? We'll discuss the numbers. We'll talk about it. And then also, if we have time, we've got some taxpayer-funded lobbying. We've got, just a plethora of issues here, just to kind of discuss spending-wise, crazy out of control. So we'll dig into all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. The more of you that like, the more of you who listen, the more of you who tune in every week, the more effort and better these shows get. And, like I said, we are talking to a group about doing it daily, a radio station about bringing it on daily. So I'll keep you guys up to date about that. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So Beshear posted this video onto his official governor account. Go ahead and take a listen to that.
Maybe when I'm gone, it won't be viewed as a win or a loss. If that's the case, if that's the reason why it hasn't passed politically, that's pretty sad, because these are 4-year-olds we're talking to. They're not registered to vote, I don't think, and can't vote. These kids aren't Democrats or Republicans, and frankly, I don't care which their parents are. And we just want the best for them. And I hope everybody will come around and see that. This should be an expression of humanity, of something that government could come together and just say, look at these kids, it's the right thing to do. Let's make sure we do it statewide.
So there you go. Beshear says it's the mean Republicans, and they're not passing pre-K for all because they just hate him. So first, let's hear him talk. He says, this isn't political. I hate that. I hate when politicians stand up there, no matter red or blue or Republican, stand up there and say, this isn't political. This isn't political. Definitionally, anything you're doing that involves running the government is political. I know what you're trying to say is that this should be bipartisan. That's the word you're looking for, bipartisan. Saying this doesn't need to be political while you're using the forces of government to take money out of our pocket and spend it on something that you want to spend it on, which is the definition of politics, the governance of a society or an area. That's what being politics is, political governance. That falls squarely into that category. So clearly it's political. But putting to the side that we no longer know what words mean, he acknowledges the kids can't vote. And so therefore it's not political, clearly, because he's doing it for people who can't even vote. Well, those kids can't vote, but their parents can. Also, they can work. And I think this is what's important to understand about this pre-K for all thing is, because there's a lot of forces that aren't even citizens that are pushing this pre-K for all. You don't just have the governor pushing it. You also have very powerful lobbying groups like the Kentucky Chamber for Commerce pushing it. You have a lot of donors pushing it. You have members of the Republican caucus who themselves are involved with childcare that would personally make a lot of money off of pushing it. And you have, of course, a fair amount of misguided citizens also pushing this pre-K for all. So it is worth discussing why it's a bad idea, because people need to know that. Legislators need to understand why it's a bad idea. So that way we don't fall into this trap of pushing forward this communistic ideas. And it is somewhat communistic because, of course, it is the ultimate kind of socialism, collectivism thing to say is that your kids don't belong to you. See, those in the Chamber of Commerce, those in the economic development world, those who really only care about economic development, and why do they care about it? I mean, they talk about, well, we need good jobs for citizens. Well, why do they want good jobs? Why do they want this data centers argument? Why do they want these businesses in the first place? So it all comes down to tax revenues. And if they can move a citizen from being not working, even if they're not pulling in, they want to say, well, this is about pulling in government benefits and blah, blah, blah. Even if they can move a person who's going from not bringing in government benefits to working, so they're not a net drain, they're just not giving revenue outside of, their working partner probably. If they're not living off government assistance, they probably have a working spouse. So if they can move a person off not working and into the workforce, well, they just then created more revenue. See, you'll hear politicians talk about this all the time. They'll say, we need to widen the tax base. They'll say that. We need to widen the tax base. And a lot of times what they want you to think they're talking about is getting people who aren't working and don't have kids and are on government assistance, off government assistance and into the workforce. But they also mean all those people who've made the bad decision, according to the government, to stay home and take care of their kids. And so they're hoping, well, if we can get kids faster into government run systems, then we can go ahead and get those parents working and get them to be a cog in the machine. That's like really dark when you think about it. It's really dark to say, well, let's move as many parents as we can out of the home and into being cogs in a machine. Look, that company you're working for, that corporation, whether it's factory work, office work, or anything else, if you were gone tomorrow, you died, something happened to you, and you're gone tomorrow, they'd feel sad for a few days and they'd have your replacement within a few weeks. Your kids, however, your family would mourn your loss forever. And instead of spending more time with those who'd mourn your loss forever, they want you to spend more time with those people who couldn't care less about you outside of filling out on a spreadsheet that they have enough people working that role. And they want to move you in, and they want to do that by separating from your kids as early as possible. That's what people like the Chamber of Commerce, when you see them pushing it, really care about. That's why they care about it. It's got nothing to do with quality education, because the idea of government and quality education has nothing to do together. On top of that, pre-K for all isn't even providing good educational outcomes. Studies on this are mixed at best. Even the people pushing it will acknowledge that. Even the people who comment on my post about this acknowledge that they're mixed at best, but they have their own caveats. We'll talk about the arguments people are making to explain why we should be for pre-K for all. After this short break here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we'll be back in a few short minutes. Delicious. Oh, what's in here? Oh, well, what's in my tumbler here, the Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler, available for sale at brewed.store, is 1776, a brewed coffee, a Kentucky proud product that's roasted right here in Kentucky, of course. You can pick yourself up a bag at brewed.store. Free shipping on orders over $85. And they're sold in per pound, both ground, whole bean, and K-cups. If you like your little K-cup machines, we have that for you too. And the best part is per pound, it's cheaper than most of the boutique freedom-loving coffees out there. And this one's made right here in your own backyard. I know that's fantastic. So pick yourself up. We've got 1776, a French roasted dark blend which is historically funny because, of course, the French financed the revolution. And then also we have one of our other signature blends, Tyrant's Tears, a coffee that we meticulously harvest from famous tyrants like Andy Beshear, Pol Pot, and, of course, Mao. Additionally, we have other single origin coffees such as Cameroon Pea Berry, Kenya, Peru. Fantastic, fantastic blends. Go ahead and pick yourself up a bag today. Not only will you be supporting the show, but also you'll be putting in your mouth a delicious and tasty black nectar called coffee. To order yours today, brewed.store. Once again, it's BREWED.store. Brewed.store. Free shipping. Orders over $85. Pick yourself up a bag and pick yourself up one of these spiffy tumblers. Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler today. Once again, that's brewed.store. And you are back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show talking about this pre-K for all plan. And Beshear saying, well, people are only against it if they're mean old Republicans. Well, first off, I would argue it's a complete waste of money to begin with. So let's ignore the collectivist big government ideas of not building a society on families, because that's what you should do. You should build the entire idea of our society was to be built on the family. That is if you're a conservative like me, you believe the family unit is the most important unit when it comes to building a society. But instead, people like Beshear, the socialists, the Democrats, they'll say it's about the community as a whole. They don't want you focusing too close at home. They want you thinking of everybody and not just your family. And the reason why worrying about your family is a whole lot better for building a society is because you can influence directly the decisions and behaviors of people in your family. You're able, hey, if your kid's acting up, you're able to say, hey, adult, child, doesn't matter. Hey, you're acting up, you're making bad decisions. But if you're responsible and you have no influence on other people's decisions, like the guy who lives several miles over, but he's a part of your community, so therefore you should care about him and by in turn pay for his mistakes, well, you can't influence his decisions though. Well, what are you going to turn to? How are you going to control that person? How are you going to stop your money from? Well, you're going to turn to the government, of course, to control it. And that's what they want. But putting that to the side, let's pretend it's all completely above board. Let's pretend none of this has to do with a agenda about government control. And it's really coming from a really clear spot where they just want the best for kids. Well, first, time and time again, data has shown, which is why I have a hard time believing it's about what's best for kids. Time and time again, data has shown that children being educated by their parents being involved in their education is the number one factor when it comes to educational outcomes. More than anything else, more than pre-K, more than financial stability, more than anything else is how involved are the parents in getting in those kids' education. And the reason why I think pre-K for all on top of our current K through 12 program is completely wrong for doing that is because essentially what we're saying to parents is, look, you don't need to worry about taking care of your kids. We got it. We got you covered. We'll handle it for you. Just drop your kid off at the government learning center every day. You come back, you pick them up. You don't have to be involved in their education. That's our job. They don't even do homework anymore, hardly, in these public schools. Something that makes a kid go to their parent and say, hey, can you help me with this? They have them turning in assignments left and right on computers now these days. They don't have them using, real a pen and paper, something you can actually sit down and work together through a problem with your kid. Instead, it's all on a computer. And don't worry, you don't need to check their work like you would if it was on paper. No, the computer will check their work. So it's like we're doing everything we can to get a parent not involved. Look, you don't got to worry. We're not even going to assign homework, but if we do, you don't even got to sit down and do it with them. The computer will teach them at home. You don't got to worry about it. And so when we're sending that message to parents, and this goes again into, this is why, and I know it's controversial. Some of you don't like it, whatever, but it goes into school choice. School choice, giving parents the ability to basically be allotted a fund per child that then they can spend at the educational institution of their choosing, why that has a lot of times better educational outcomes isn't because even per se that the charter schools or the private schools they send their kids to are necessarily better quality, though they are. But it isn't necessarily that they're better, and we can tell by outcomes, but it's not that they're necessarily a better quality. It's that the parent, it's sending a message when the parent is making that decision. It's saying, look, you have a role in your child's education. And that engagement creates better educational outcomes. So that's why, one, I have a hard time believing people when they say pre-K for all is a good idea really actually care about the educational outcomes for the kids, because they'd be actually talking about how do we get more parents to teach kids if that's what they're worried about. How do we get parents more involved? How do we engage them better? But instead they're saying, how do we get the government involved with paying for parents to be able to send their kids somewhere else so they can add on more years of not having to care about a child's education? But putting that to the side, let's pretend that is what they really care about. And for some reason, they think it's the best thing. Well, the studies are mixed on this. Almost every study says that kids enrolled in pre-K for all versus not pre-K for all, kids who went to pre-K and kids who didn't, by the time they get to middle school, those gains, they have early gains, kindergarten, first, second grade, but by the time they get to middle school, it's evened out and those gains have gone away. Now, what's funny is the critics or the people who want to support pre-K for all, that want to poke holes in my reasoning why we shouldn't be for it, will even admit, go read on my comments, they'll admit that yes, it's mixed. However, when you see a high quality pre-K program, the results are much better. And so that's what we should be focusing on, a high quality pre-K program for all. Well, I don't know how to tell them this, but the idea of government and quality education being involved in the same sentence and the word not coming before the word quality is impossible. It is impossible for government to get involved in something and that service and that process be a high quality process. The minute government gets involved in anything, education, water, roads, everything. Name one thing the government does outside of collecting up money from the taxpayer that they do at a high quality rate. I mean, they'll get that money. Trust me, they'll get that money. But outside of that, what do they do that you would say is high quality at the government? So the idea you're going to get a consistent, which is what you need to get the good, with what even the people who are proponents that want to say that my pointing out the studies is slightly flawed, because if it's a high quality pre-K program, then there is benefits. What are the chances any of them will go to a high quality pre-K program? Pretty low chances, almost zero. And so, because of course it's government inspired, government run. And of course, the minute government touches anything, it gets more expensive. So, but on top of that, when we get into the money side of thing and why this is a giant suck, look at our current K through 12 education system. Something, by the way, that's worked fine, and we had better achievements in reading proficiency and everything else for decades than what we have now. We have our two biggest school districts, Fayette County schools, Jefferson County schools, Louisville and Lexington, bringing in, not even what they're spending, because obviously they're having money issues, so they're spending more than they're bringing in, but bringing in more than $20,000 a student in net revenues from taxes, federal government, state government, so on and so forth. More than $20,000 a student, and they're having financial issues. They're struggling. On top of the outcomes being cruddy, on top of the fact that like half the kids can't read, on top of the fact that in JCPS, if you look at the statistical data on likelihood of having an inappropriate sexual interaction with a teacher compared to the proficiency rating of science for kids who graduate from JCPS, kids who graduate from Jefferson County Public Schools are more likely to have a sexually inappropriate encounter with a teacher than they are to graduate proficient in science. and they're spending over $20,000 a year per student, or bringing in over $20K per student per year. And they're having financial issues and the outcomes suck. So you can have, and if you want to argue, look, the outcomes suck because, they don't have that pre-K for all. Okay. What about the financial issues then? You can't suck and have financial issues. Like, that's not a good combination for selling me in the idea that pre-K for all there. On top of that, once again, Beshear's plan, if it's not going to involve the K through 12 program adding on pre-K, so pre-K through 12, right? Then that means it had to be a voucher system, something he's floated. Remember, he ran against a voucher system when he was running for re-election for governor. So it seems a little hypocritical to say, look, when it comes through K through 12 education, a voucher system's bad. But when it comes to pre-K educational systems, a voucher system is just dandy. A pre-K educational system of vouchers, okay. Remember, his argument against vouchers in K through 12 was that it would lead to lower quality, worse outcomes for K through 12 education. But when you come to pre-K, which even the people who support it admit is only effective if you have a high quality pre-K program, and even then I'd argue it's not effective, but they would argue it is, but only if it's a high quality program, then that's their argument. And if they say, well, a voucher system leads to low quality K through 12, then why would they offer a voucher system for pre-K? It's like they're saying a voucher system is the only thing that can lead to a high quality pre-K program. Seems a little crazy. And coming up after this, Rocky Adkins declares he's running for governor. We'll talk about that primary, how it's shaping up. Could be interesting. What are his chances? We'll discuss all that and more coming up on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Also, have time, we'll be talking about that data centers debacles going on everywhere. Data center. It went from no data centers to data centers, and it's just so annoying to me that this is even an issue. And people sitting there saying, "Oh, if we don't build multiple billion-dollar data centers, we're going to fall behind China." It's like, how many of these data centers do they need? You're able to use AI, store your phones, do this, watch this show with our current amount of data centers. And we don't have that many, I don't think, hyperscale data centers. So how many more do we need to do what? It's a lot of questions. We'll be discussing that when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll be discussing Rocky Adkins declaring and then discussing that. We'll have that when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Stay with us. Do you hear that? I do. It's Beshear crying. Why? Because you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And I thought to myself, why should we let those tears go to waste? Like any good capitalist, I said, that is a resource that can be sold. So we capture those tears from Andy Beshear and other famous tyrants like Pol Pot, Mao, whoever else. And we collect them up and we put them into a delicious coffee called Tyrant's Tears, available at brood.store. Once again, that's brood.store. You can pick yourself up a spiffy Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler while you're at it and get yourself a nice bag. Free shipping on orders over $85. We have Tyrant's Tears in 1776, our signature blends. We also have flavored coffees such as Swiss chocolate and bourbon for those of you that want a little kick without the buzz from, well, alcohol. You'll get the buzz from the caffeine, though. Check out today. Brood.store. This is a Kentucky Proud product, roasted right in your own backyard. Brood.store. Support the show. It's cheaper per pound than most of those other boutique coffees. And it's available whole bean, ground, K-Cups. However you make your coffee, we got you covered. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So Rocky Adkins declares he's running for governor. He's going to take a stab at it here. Let's take a look here. Here's his video he put out, introducing his big run. It's a little long, about 3 minutes, but go ahead. Let's take a listen to that.
We've always been fighters. Gotten knocked down, felt the sting of defeat. You have to call upon everything inside of you just to keep going, to keep fighting. From growing up in eastern Kentucky to every city block and every country mile, I've learned one thing that always holds true. We keep fighting. The truth is, we haven't had a choice. Though I've stood side by side with Governor Beshear, holding the line, fighting back against Washington and its reckless policies, against anything that hurts Kentucky, life is still too hard for too many. It's getting harder every day. Rural hospitals hanging by a thread, Medicaid and Medicare on the chopping block. It's hard to dream about owning a home when rent takes everything you've got. And what good is a job when childcare costs more than your paycheck? Politicians fight for attention, while everyday Kentuckians fight just to breathe. I've spent my life fighting for Kentucky, creating jobs, expanding access to health care for hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians who never had it before, improving our schools, standing up for working families, and taking on the powerful so you get a fair shot. That's my record. Over that lifetime of service, I've delivered results, and I've been knocked down, but I refuse to quit because I'm a Kentuckian, and we keep fighting. For each other, for a better future. Keep fighting so everything we work for doesn't disappear, gone just like that. If we lose, they take complete control. No check, no balance, no stopping the radical agenda. As Democrats, we embrace diversity and respect differing opinions, but we can't afford to fight each other, because next November, we must win. And to do that, we must be united. So catch your breath, get back up, dust yourself off, and fight. Join me in this fight for Kentucky's future. I'm Rocky Adkins. There's two things I know to always hold true. You keep fighting, and I'll keep fighting for you.
There you go. He's a fighter. He's here to fight for Kentucky, he says. It's always kind of strange when you have politicians who've been a part of the system for like decades that sit there and talk about how flawed everything is and how you're struggling so much and how they're suddenly going to fix it as if they haven't been there the whole time. Always so strange. Also, I always find it annoying when politicians declare they're running for office and talk about how they're going to serve Kentucky. They're here to serve Kentucky. They're going to serve Kentucky. Now, serving Kentucky would be like, hey, I'm going to go do a dangerous job, police officer, National Guardsman, something like that. Or, I'm going to serve Kentucky by doing either a job that is volunteer or I'm highly underpaid for what I'm doing, whether that's pro bono legal services or whether that's, volunteering in your community after storms, those kinds of things. Only politicians take a job that involves getting paid nearly $200,000 a year plus benefits plus pension get 24/7 security, get to live in a mansion paid for by the taxpayers, get tons of office staff paid for, and get to travel in a private plane paid for by the taxpayers, and then turn around and call that serving. Like them and like mega church prosperity gospel pastors. Those are the only two that get to call it serving. Politicians and mega church prosperity gospel pastors are the only two that get to fly around in private planes with private security, get paid hundreds of thousands of years, get pensions and health and all those things all paid for, and then get to turn around and call it a community service, like they're sacrificing something. On top of that, you're like the governor, like you run everything, and so your great service and sacrifice is to tell everybody what to do with their lives. That's your great service and sacrifice. I just find that funny personally. I'm making a great sacrifice. This is a great service to Kentucky by me telling you all what to do and getting paid hundreds of thousands and receiving nearly millions in fringe benefits to do it. It's just a real struggle. That's what they sound like to me. Absolutely ridiculous. But putting that to the side, it does set up what will be, I think, the last great primary in Democrats, because they don't have much of a bench. I mean, we saw this. Amy McGrath, she's done, put a fork in her. Booker here, he's done after this, after he loses to Andy Barr, put a fork in him, he's done. You know, they don't have a bench. Who are they going to get? Maybe Jim Gray. I think that would be, because if they lose here this governor's race, they won't have the ability to have a lieutenant governor. I mean, look at the two big names running for governor right now. It's Beshear's lieutenant governor and Beshear's like closest aide. Essentially his I don't know, assistant governor, if you could have that, even though lieutenant governor is supposed to be that, you know what I mean? Of the people actually does stuff. He's there. That's who you have running. Those are the two big names. That's probably the only two big names that are going to run. So what do you have left? I mean, Coleman could try again in 4 years, but who's going to challenge her after that? So that's my point. There's not much of a bench left. So this could be the last great Democrat primary for some time, because you won't have Democrat senators. You have Yarmouth. Maybe he could run, or not Yarmouth. Sorry. That's not who has that. Morgan McGarvey. Maybe he can. I mean, Morgan McGarvey, the congressman out of Louisville, becomes like the de facto Democrat leader. He's the Democrat person elected to the highest office. And then whoever the minority leader is in the Senate. I mean, that's it. That's who you have. And then let's look at that bench. I mean, even with who's running, Coleman, somewhat known, but definitely not like a household name, not like Beshear. And Adkins, known to Rockies, known to like people in politics. Like, I know who he is. You know, there's a few libraries or centers named after him too. He's certainly known in parts of Eastern Kentucky as well. But to like your everyday person, the vast majority of people who vote in that governor's race, they have no idea who Rocky Adkins is. Now, here's the thing. And this is what I think is important. And this is why I don't think it matters which one of them win. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. Because let's look at, obviously, Beshear running for re-election gets his re-election victory, but he's running as an incumbent, obviously very well known at that point. But when he first ran, he didn't have the incumbency effect, because neither of these two will have the incumbency effect. He was running against Bevin, who was made widely unpopular, obviously, whether he deserved to be or not. He was made hugely unpopular. Obviously, teachers' unions, everything else came in against him. And also, at the same time, Beshear was a household name. So you were running against somebody who, rightfully or not, was made widely unpopular. And you have a name, Beshear, that's very well known. And he was Attorney General currently, too, bench. And he only won by 5,000 votes. Not a lot. And so when it comes time for these ones to be running, and they don't have any of the same background, what will they be able to pull off? They're not a household name. Can they win? Can any Democrat win? I don't know. They're certainly coming from two sides of the house. So we'll discuss that when we get back, and we'll talk about this data center, secrecy, NGOs going on in Eastern Kentucky. Well, that when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. One more point on the Jacqueline Coleman, Rocky Adkins primary. They're clearly, this is what's interesting. So realistically, come to a general, I would say Rocky has probably a better chance of beating. I don't think either of them could win, honestly. I think, I guess they could win. I think either of them is going to have a huge struggle to win. I think Beshear's the last Democrat governor for some time. I mean, that just, the name, the nepotism, the bad governor. I mean, claimed bad governor. I mean, it just, anyways. But let's say either of them could win. It's possible. Statistically, it's possible. I think, in a general, Adkins would have a better chance than Coleman. And here's why. Rocky Adkins is honestly closer to what the modern Republicans in Kentucky are than he is to what a modern Kentucky Democrat is. Because you got to think, right? So what were Democrats 20 years ago in Kentucky? The people who are currently voting for Republicans in Kentucky, which is helping push how Republicans act and behave in Kentucky. They're people who feel strongly about, obviously, guns and abortion. They're against abortion, guns and babies, right? They're against abortion, Christians. They want their guns, against gun control. But at the same time, they believe in essentially, it used to be that old adage that they're for like the little guy, that, the corporations obviously are coming after them and they want to be defended from those corporations. They want the Democrats sticking up for the little guy, where that's taxing the corporations more to give more benefits to the little guy, or protecting unions, those kinds of things. That's what the Democrats were shaped as. And Republicans were shaped as, quote unquote, the big business party, the party that would give those handouts and protections to the corporations and do their bidding because of trickle-down economics. If they do what the big corporations want, everybody will make more money. That's kind of the way they were cast in the most positive tone for the Democrats, the most negative tone for Republicans. Obviously, it's a lot different than that, but let's just go with that. In other words, Democrats were populists. But today's modern Republican Party is closer to populist. It's like a weird. So both parties do the bidding of the corporations because that's just what it's turned into. I mean, they both agree on the economic things. They used to disagree on the economic things. They both agree with it. And so considering that both parties have the same, I believe, kind of economic belief system largely, the only difference is the social issues. And honestly, Rocky doesn't strike me that much of a social issue guy. But Jacqueline Coleman does. I mean, that's her thing. That's one of her things. I'm woman, hear me roar, social issues, blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously education, but a lot about social issues. And so for that reason, everybody who would support Rocky in the Democrat Party, I think in large part, has moved over to the Republican Party. And so will he survive the primary? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how much they go at each other. If Coleman actually comes out swinging at Rocky, if it is actually a competitive primary, I don't think, like, in the sense that they're not just talking positive about each other, but Jacqueline Coleman actually attacks Rocky Adkins. There is so much there that the modern Democrats, in that, keep in mind, only Democrats vote in the primary, will push away, that I don't see how he survives that. That being stated, if they don't, Rocky could win that primary, and he has a better chance of winning in the general than Coleman does. I think either one of them would struggle against who the Republican will end up likely being, which is Comer. And so certainly, and then, like I said, they have no bench. So what's the next thing? Here's the other thing I want to discuss real quick. It's about these data center story going on out in eastern Kentucky. Here, supposedly, this local counties and cities were not informed of a NGO that is receiving taxpayer funds. So this NGO is called One Eastern Kentucky. It receives directly, according to their 990s, $180K in 2024 in government grants. And then they say, well, but we get private funding elsewhere. But when you look at their partners page on their website, you're going to see a few others of these private partners that themselves are government funded. And so it's kind of like laundering money that goes to them through other NGOs that also claim it. And so at the end of the day, you trace it all down. And most of their funding comes from one of two things: a power company or a government funding. That's where most of their funding, according to their website, according to their 990s, appears to be coming from. And supposedly they went through the effort of marketing out and putting together this plan that in this industrial park in eastern Kentucky, they will build a power plant to supply the same amount of power that would supply about 80,000 homes. So basically about 8 counties there in eastern Kentucky's worth of homes, power to a hyperscale data center built in that area. here's what I'll say about this. And I've seen a few people claiming that those who are against data centers being necessarily built are cat's paws of the Chinese and falling to Chinese propaganda. I haven't been propagandized by China at all. I've seen a few videos of people having concerns, obviously, about the waste coming off the water, the noise, the size. My main concern personally, and I've said this a few times, is that technology is ever moving. One, I'm confused on why we need so many of these. Two, I don't like how much government's going after something that provides so little jobs. I'm talking like here in Kentucky, providing a 50-year sales tax moratorium to them. So I have some problems with that as well. Obviously, driving up the cost of property, causing, of course, an increase in taxes for everybody involved. Oldham County talking about even Beshear coming out saying these data centers could double the amount of money going into school systems, which is, it tells you that everybody's property taxes are going up. Outside of all those things, my main concern is, you build these just massive, massive facilities and technology moves so much. I mean, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about hyperscale data centers, and chances are 10 years from now, whatever they're building now won't even be what the current technology is. They'll be seeking out something cheaper. I've seen things saying, oh, it'll be smaller. Everybody will have their own little server maybe, or it'll be up in space, or it'll be down in whatever it may be. But what are you going to do with these massive, huge honking buildings that now are decrepit and falling apart in the middle of these towns, just absolutely destroying the area? And then you have placement concerns, putting them near homes, obviously the noise, everything else. These are real concerns people have. They're not made up. They're not fake. They're real concerns. So calling everybody who has a problem with it Chinese propaganda is absolutely ridiculous. I have a real problem like this Eastern Kentucky thing with using taxpayer funds to attract in businesses that large amounts of people don't even want, which I think points to something. But anyway, to those talking about these Chinese propaganda, I literally had to go, because it just started popping up in my feed recently of people making those comments. So I literally went and looked at the Fox News webpage, and there's a few articles there about China influence, this influence plan to get us to hate data centers so they can get ahead. And they're turning it into we can't let China beat us. Well, first off, if this is about providing enough processing power for AIs to power our military concerns, I don't think we need, there's like 10 just in Kentucky. I don't think we need that many if it's only about military concerns at all. But because I don't think it's just about military concerns, it's about training AIs into the future. That's what it's about. But not just training them for military uses, but training them in large part for a whole lot of things and to store a whole lot of data. And that isn't military data, it's your data. But on top of that, putting that to the side once again, the people claiming, I'm hearing that, and it seems to be coming from, like I heard Kevin O'Leary talking about it, a guy making money off building data centers. Really, good source there. Talking about that Chinese influence thing, trying to fund these campaigns. Look, these connections are tenuous at best. They do an A to B to C, D to E type thing to make these claims, okay? We saw the same thing happening to Trump with the Russia hoax, saying, oh, Russia created this Facebook page that had 1 million reach during the election, so therefore 1 million people voted for Trump, because 1 million people reached on Facebook is nothing. That's what I do in like a week or two. That's like nothing. And I'm not influencing a presidential election outcome, okay? What Russia was doing is not why Trump won. But people saw this. They see a number. People don't understand it. And so they're able to grab onto that to convince you that this is a foreign op. And they're doing the same thing with China, where maybe China funded this group, and then that group gave money to this group. Then that group sees that all these people are caring about this issue, and they're trying to drive in more names and numbers and connections and drive up their profile. So they're going to care about data centers now. And so it's like, well, that group cares about it, and they got money from that group and that group and that group, and that group got money from China. And at the end of the day, it's a drop in the bucket. It has no effect on what's going on, but we can gin it up to convince people that if you hate the idea of a data center in your backyard, you're falling victim to Chinese propaganda, and it's just ridiculous. But y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank y'all so much for joining me. See you back here next week. Hope you have a great rest of your day.